Abby and Libby were smart, curious, and into true crime. On February 13th, they became victims of one. Found dead on a trail, their killer left behind eerie clues. 3 years later, the case is still open, and stranger than you think. 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German headed out to enjoy some fresh air at their favorite local hiking trail in Delphi, Indiana. It was supposed to be a carefree afternoon, but by the end of that day, everything changed. The two girls were murdered, and to this day, no one knows who did it. The unthinkable in Delphi. Abigail and Liberty, or as everyone who knew them called them, Abby and Libby, were tight, best friends, soul sisters. They met back in 6th grade and just instantly clicked. They were both outdoorsy, into sports, photography, and shared big dreams. Abby wanted to become a cop. Libby dreamed of being a science teacher and was already taking science classes at Purdue University, believe it or not. These girls were smart, ambitious, and way ahead of their time. But what made them click so well was how different they were. Abby was the quieter one, more reserved. Libby, the bold one, outspoken, kind, and fiercely protective. The kind of friend who'd stand up to a bully without flinching. She was the therapist of the group, always listening, always helping. February 13, 17, a day that started like any other. That Monday was no regular weekday. Thanks to an unused snow day, school was out. Abby had stayed over at Libby's the night before. The girls spent the evening painting, watching movies, and playing softball in the yard. That morning, Libby's grandpa Mike cooked them a special breakfast, just one of those cozy family mornings. Around noon, Abby and Libby asked Libby's older sister, 16-year-old Kelsey, if she could drive them to the Mary Gerard Nature Preserve, a local hiking spot with trails they'd been itching to explore. They'd actually asked her about it a week before, but this time, Kelsey agreed. She'd be passing by on the way to her boyfriend's house anyway. Before heading out, Libby made sure to get the green light from her grandma, Becky. The rule was clear, as long as they had a ride back. Libby texted her dad, Derek, and he agreed to pick them up around 3 p.m. once he finished running errands. Kelsey dropped the girls off at 1:45 p.m. and watched as they headed down the trail until they disappeared from view. Everything seemed totally normal. No red flags, nothing sketchy in sight. A trail that should have been safe. The Mary Gerard trails are usually buzzing with hikers, bikers, and families. They're wide, flat, and filled with nature. One of the more isolated paths, though, is the Monon High Bridge Trail, stretching 1.5 miles to the edge of a giant abandoned railroad bridge from the 1800s. It's huge, 64 feet high, 845 feet long, and dangerous. The bridge is technically closed to the public, blocked off with a red metal barrier, and has no safety rails. Still, local teens often dared each other to cross it for the thrill. 3:11 p.m., the moment things shifted. At 3:11 p.m., Derek texted Libby, "On my way." He pulled up 2 minutes later, but the girls weren't there. He waited. No sign of them. He called Libby's phone, no answer. That was odd. She always picked up. Starting to get worried, Derek walked the trails, calling out for them. He ran into a man named Dan McCain, who hadn't seen the girls, but did mention he saw a couple under the bridge. At 3:30, still no sign of them, Derek called Becky. She hadn't seen them either. Now she was concerned too. Becky started contacting the girls' friends. Nothing. No one had heard from them. She called Kelsey, who hadn't spoken to Libby since the drop-off. Kelsey immediately left her boyfriend's house and headed for the trail. At 4:20, Becky called Mike at work. Hearing what was going on, he left right away. Just before she left, her son Cody, Libby's uncle, got home and joined the search. The family scatters across the trails. By 5 p.m., the whole family was out there. They split up and started shouting the girls' names. Kelsey and Cody took the Monon High Bridge Trail and even crossed the bridge. Kelsey had done it once before, and it freaked her out so bad she had to crawl. This time, she pushed through it with Cody. When they got to the end, something caught Kelsey's eye, a disturbance in the dirt, like someone had slid or fallen down the hill. At the time, she didn't think much of it. Now she wishes she'd taken a picture. They kept going down the hill and started knocking on doors. Only one person answered, and no, they hadn't seen Abby or Libby. Meanwhile, Derek kept calling Libby's phone. For a while it rang. Then suddenly it stopped, straight to voicemail. Becky tried using a Find My Phone app, but it didn't work. Libby had recently reset her phone. Becky even called AT&T for help, but they couldn't track it either. 5:20 p.m., the call that changed everything. After an hour of searching, they realized this was serious. Mike called the police and reported the girls missing. Then came the hard part, telling Abby's mom. Becky drove to the restaurant where Anna Williams worked and broke the news in person. Anna was upset, but still optimistic. Like everyone else, she thought the girls had probably wandered off too far or lost track of time. She was ready to give Abby a good scolding when she finally saw her. But that moment never came. After a full hour of searching and coming up empty, at around 5:20 p.m., Mike made the gut-wrenching decision to call the police and report Abby and Libby missing. Meanwhile, it dawned on Becky that Anna Williams, Abby's mom, still hadn't been told her daughter was nowhere to be found. Becky tried calling, but got no answer. So she drove straight to Anna's workplace, a restaurant, and told her the news face to face. Anna was frustrated. She thought Abby was just being careless, maybe ignoring her phone or losing track of time. She never imagined anything darker. Just like Becky, she was sure the girls had simply wandered off too far. At worst, Abby was going to get a long, stern lecture when they were finally tracked down. Police arrived about 30 minutes after Mike's call. At first, no one thought the girls had run into real danger. Family members were interviewed at the sheriff's office, and Kelsey, Libby's sister, was grilled the most since she was the last one to see them. When asked if Libby had posted anything that day, Kelsey opened Snapchat, the app Libby used constantly. 2 photos stood out. One was a black and white shot of the bridge. The other showed Abby walking toward Libby across it. The time? Around 2:07 p.m. Police tried pinging Libby's phone late into the night, but nothing came through. Either the battery died, or someone shut it off on purpose. They dug deeper into the girls' digital lives. Libby's online presence didn't raise any red flags. Abby didn't even have a phone. Her only device was a Kindle Fire she got for Christmas. But what caught investigators off guard was a secret Facebook account Abby had created, one her mom didn't know about. Abby wasn't even supposed to be on Facebook yet. She was 13, and the platform's age limit was 14. On the account, there was a friend, some guy Anna didn't recognize. But the lead fizzled quickly. Investigators assured her they were pretty sure the girls hadn't arranged to meet anyone from online. By 6 p.m., the search exploded. Around 100 local volunteers joined the Delphi Fire Department and the Department of Natural Resources to comb through the area. As midnight neared, a decision was made: officially call off the search. It wasn't just one person's call. Multiple agencies got together and agreed the woods were too dark and dangerous to keep going. The search would restart at sunrise. Sheriff Tobe Leesenby later explained that based on past behavior, they didn't think the girls were in immediate danger. He mentioned times when Abby and Libby had gone to each other's homes without telling anyone, and people just assumed they'd done that again. February 14th. Even though the official search was paused, some volunteers refused to quit and kept searching through the night. At 8:15 a.m., the full-scale effort kicked back into gear. About 100 searchers were handed maps and split into groups. By noon, the unimaginable happened. Their bodies were found. Right before the discovery, a volunteer had asked Kelsey what shoes Libby was wearing. Kelsey told him, black Nike sneakers. That same volunteer soon stumbled across one of Libby's shoes. As soon as word got out, dread settled over Kelsey. Her instincts screamed that something terrible had happened. Then in the corner of his eye, the same volunteer spotted movement in the trees. He lifted his phone, zoomed in with the camera, and saw 2 deer curiously sniffing at something on the ground. As he got closer, the heartbreaking truth was revealed. There, less than a mile from the end of the Manon High Bridge, on private land along Deer Creek, lay Abby and Libby, lifeless. By 1 p.m., the area was locked down. The FBI jumped in immediately. Together with the Indiana State Police, they worked around the clock over the next several days gathering evidence. Although the details weren't shared with the public, transcripts revealed disturbing findings. The girls' undergarments were discovered in the creek beneath the bridge, and a fresh cigarette butt was found nearby. Its exact placement still unclear. Carroll County Prosecutor Robert Ives later visited the crime scene himself. He described it as odd and physically strange, and couldn't believe the case hadn't been solved within days. There was, in his words, a lot of evidence. Investigation. The very next day, the worst was confirmed. The bodies were Abby and Libby. That evening, at 7 p.m., Indiana State Police released a chilling photo, a still image of a man caught on the trail near the time of the girls' disappearance. In the picture, a Caucasian man walks along the Manon High Bridge, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, head slightly down. He's wearing jeans and a blue jacket. No one could tell if he had on a hat, hood, or neither. At that time, police emphasized that he wasn't a suspect yet. They just wanted to talk to him. By the following Sunday, everything changed. That man? Now officially the main suspect. Then, on Wednesday, February 22nd, another major announcement. At a press conference, police revealed that Libby, showing remarkable courage, had managed to record a snippet of audio from her phone. In the clip, the suspect could be heard saying one haunting line, "Down the hill." Sergeant Tony Slocum called her a hero. "There's no doubt," he said, "to have the presence of mind to activate her phone and capture what we believe was the beginning of a crime? Incredible." Authorities confirmed more audio exists but didn't release it since the investigation is still open. Online, people debated. Was the phone found with the bodies, or did the killer leave it behind? Police cleared it up. It was recovered in the general area where the girls were found. Since then, investigators have remained mostly silent. They haven't revealed how the girls were killed or said anything about a murder weapon. But we do know this. They knocked on doors, looked into 12 known sex offenders in Delphi, and extended their investigation to hundreds more in nearby cities. They reached out across the country, compared similar cases, and cleared friends, relatives, and everyone close to the girls. Libby and Abby's social accounts were picked apart. Every online connection was tracked down and interviewed. Over 1,000 people were questioned, and most gave up their DNA without hesitation. Police issued 70 subpoenas and 12 search warrants, but never publicly shared if anything significant came from them. The case went quiet until July 17. That's when Indiana State Police released a composite sketch created from witness accounts. Sunshine Kim Riley explained they'd heard from new people, locals who were in the area that day but either hadn't been contacted before or were too scared to come forward. One woman, in particular, said she'd been close enough to notice the man's eyes, but she was sure they weren't blue. The sketch showed a stocky, older guy in a hoodie and newsboy cap. His features? A bulbous nose, narrow lips that turned downward, and eyes with a distinct epicanthic fold. But police warned, don't focus on the hat. The suspect was described as a white male, 5'6" to 5'10", weighing 180 to 220 pounds, with reddish-brown hair. When the police released the suspect's sketch, the internet exploded. Armchair detectives and online sleuths started doing what they do best, digging. Suddenly, side-by-side photos of random people next to the sketch were all over social media. The intention might have been good, sure, but the consequences? Not so much. Investigators warned that this kind of speculation was not only hurting the case, but it was also putting innocent people and their families, jobs, and reputations at serious risk. Still, the images kept circulating. From the day the murders happened, there haven't been many publicly known suspects or persons of interest. But every now and then, something big would surface, and the case would be thrust back into the spotlight. One of the first major names was Daniel Nations. He was pulled over in Colorado for threatening people on a trail with a hatchet. Yep. 2 weeks before that, a man named Tim Watkins was murdered on that very same trail, still unsolved. Inside Nations' red Chevy Prism, police found that hatchet and a .22 caliber rifle. His rap sheet? Long. Petty crimes, domestic violence, and, most disturbingly, he was a registered sex offender, once charged for indecent exposure after masturbating in front of a young woman in South Carolina. Nations had ties to Indiana. He even told authorities he'd been homeless, living under a bridge on Indiana 67 since January 31st, 2017, just weeks before the Delphi murders. In October, Indiana State Police questioned him and collected his DNA. By December, they admitted he was still on the radar, but not a top priority. Interestingly, the day after Abby and Libby were murdered, Nations had shown up for his regular check-in with authorities, like clockwork. As of January 2018, he pleaded guilty to menacing and got 3 years probation. And though the suspicion lingered, he's never been formally accused in the Watkins case or the Delphi one. Then came Thomas Bruce, 53, who surfaced in November 2018 after a truly horrifying crime. He walked into a religious supply store in St. Louis, forced 3 women, including 53-year-old Jamie Schmidt, into a back room at gunpoint and ordered them to strip and perform sexual acts. Schmidt refused. He shot her in the head, cold-blooded. When Indiana police saw Bruce's mugshot, they noticed a resemblance to the Delphi sketch and reached out to Missouri authorities. But when asked directly if Bruce was connected to the Delphi murders, Indiana State Police played it safe, saying it was too early to tell. And that was the last public word they gave about him. Fast forward to January 2019. Another name hits the news. Charles Eldridge, 46. He was caught in a sting operation after he arranged to meet up with someone he thought was a 13-year-old girl. It was actually a cop. Eldridge was hit with 2 counts of child molestation. As soon as word spread, the Delphi tip line lit up. Indiana locals were quick to point out that Eldridge looked eerily similar to the sketch. Even more chilling, He'd posted about Abby and Libby online, shared pictures of nature trails, and owned multiple guns. State police issued a rare statement. We're aware of the arrest and looking into any possible connection. They also reminded the public, this kind of tip happens all the time, and every single one is investigated, whether or not it makes headlines. But they don't comment on the specifics of their ongoing work. In the end, nothing came of the Eldridge lead either. Another name added to the list and crossed off. For 5 long years, the Delphi murders haunted Indiana and the rest of the world. 2 best friends, Abby and Libby, had gone out for a walk on the Monon High Bridge and never came back. Their bodies were found the next day, but the case went cold until 2022, when everything suddenly cracked open. Richard Allen, a 50-year-old pharmacy technician at CVS, yes, the place where people pick up their prescriptions and get their photos developed, was arrested and charged with the murders. And get this, Allen had lived in Delphi the entire time, literally right there. He wasn't some drifter or mysterious stranger. He was just a normal guy, blending into the community, even chatting with locals about the case over the years. So how did they finally pin it on him? It all started with a piece of physical evidence left at the crime scene, an unspent .40 caliber bullet found between the girls' bodies. Investigators managed to link that bullet to a gun that Richard Allen owned, a 6-hour P226. The ballistics matched. That was a major break. But it got darker. Back in 2017, just days after the murders, Allen had actually told police that he'd been on the Monon High Bridge the same day the girls disappeared. He said he was just there to watch the fish, but for some reason, that tip didn't go anywhere at the time. It just sat buried in paperwork until it resurfaced years later. Once he was back on the radar, the investigation intensified. During interviews in 2022, Allen reportedly made several incriminating statements. He allegedly admitted to being on the bridge when the girls were there, and according to court documents, he even confessed to some involvement in the murders. The exact details of what he said are still partly under wraps, but it was enough to charge him. And here's something that makes your skin crawl. Allen worked at CVS, which means he might have developed photos for people in the same community he terrorized. People may have smiled at him at the counter, never knowing he was possibly hiding a horrific secret. The case took another bizarre turn when Allen's attorneys later claimed he was being set up by a group of Odinist cult members, people who supposedly performed ritual sacrifices. They say Allen's confession wasn't real and that he's being framed. Wild, right? But despite the defense's theory, the prosecution is holding firm, confident that the physical evidence and Allen's own words will bring justice for Abby and Libby.